Julia Manchester joins me now from Washington. She's a reporter for The Hill. Julia, welcome. We also heard about a proposed new asylum policy this weekend. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the president essentially proposed that those seeking asylum to get into the U.S. would have to be held in Mexico until all of their paperwork is essentially processed. Now, that kind of creates a bit of a dilemma for the administration because the incoming presidential administration under incoming President Obrador in Mexico, they said that this isn't their policy. So that definitely creates a problem for President Trump, who's essentially saying that Mexico has to hold these people until their paperwork is processed, quite a bit for another neighboring nation to take on. And you're seeing other lawmakers saying they will not support this policy because they say it's not the law of the land in the U.S.
Well, the president is also pushing for more funding for his border wall. This comes as a possible government shutdown looms next month. What's at stake here?
You know, a lot is at stake here, but, you know, we're seeing that the border wall has become a major central issue for this. You know, you're seeing a lot of Republicans trying to urge compromise in Congress on the border wall and border security. However, Democrats who have said they'll support border security are very cautious about and have said they will not support funding for a border wall. And you're seeing President Trump threaten once again today to shut down the U.S. border with Mexico until they hold those immigrants, saying that essentially that the Congress needs to fund the wall. So a lot is at stake here in this immigration fight, especially the border wall, which has become a very centralized part of that.
Well, meantime, House Democrats will hold leadership elections Wednesday. 16 Democrats signed a letter last week promising to vote against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. Where does she stand now with votes?
Well, we saw that another progressive Democratic lawmaker signed on to that letter today. However, Nancy Pelosi seems actually like she's almost in the clear at this point. You know, a lot of people, including Marcia Fudge, who it was talked about whether she would challenge her. She floated the idea for a while, have actually reversed course and kind of rallied around Pelosi. So I think a lot of members, including a lot of those freshman members, including incoming Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have said that they need to rally around a leader, and they're willing to do that to work with Pelosi. I think a lot of these members realize the influence and power Pelosi has within the party, how she's able to whip votes, fundraise for them, and I think they realize that she might be a vital person to have it playing in their favor in the immediate future.
Well, on the other side of the aisle, Republican lawmakers are rebutting the president's defense of the Saudi crown prince, whom the CIA believes ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. What momentum is there in Congress to take action and hold Mohammed bin Salman responsible?
Right. So you're seeing a lot of Republicans, including Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, really speak out against this and float taking action against this. And you're definitely seeing it on the Democratic side as well. And they have obviously attacked the president for his rhetoric on this. But, you know, I think this has been a question that has plagued U.S. foreign policy for years now. You know, Saudi Arabia has been involved in what many would say are nefarious activities, including the 9/11 terror plot. So I think in terms of that, you know, you're going to see some, you know, wanting to push against Saudi Arabia. However, the U.S. and Saudi Arabian relationship is complicated because the U.S. relies on them so much in terms of geopolitics in the Middle East, as well as energy sources such as oil.
The G20 summit convenes Friday. Let me ask about that. A sideline meeting is planned between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Now, the president has faced criticism for cozying up to Russia before. Is there any reason to expect that things will be different this time around?
You know, I don't think there's much reason to expect things will be different this time around. You're seeing the president continuing to rail against the Russia probe in Congress. But I would go to his most recent comments today on the incident in Ukraine, in the Ukraine today, in which he said that, you know, it's bad for both sides. He didn't call out Russia. You know, his own UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, and his own Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, were very forceful in their rhetoric against Russia's actions, seizing those ships and cruise crew members in Ukraine. But we're seeing the president kind of, step back a little bit, not wanting to go after Putin immediately. So that would show to me that it's going to be business as usual for these two, which appears to be rather warm in the past. But lots can change by that time.
Absolutely. But Monday, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley condemned Russia for firing at Ukrainian ships, and she called it, quote, an arrogant act that the international community must condemn and will never accept. Remind us how NATO plays a role here.
NATO is very important because essentially these attacks by Russia that we've seen over the past, I would say over 10 years, they're, going into, former Soviet states such as Georgia, getting involved in the eastern Ukraine as well as Crimea. That's kind of a pushback against various Western institutions such as the European Union and NATO. You're seeing a lot of these, you're seeing NATO trying to keep its sphere of influence in Europe as well as institutions like the European Union, but this is essentially Russia pushing back against this. However, we heard that NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said earlier today that Russia will essentially have to answer to these actions, but at the same time, they want to try to de-escalate things. So NATO in a very tricky situation right here, and we're seeing that once again, Russia, tries to almost, poke the bear a lot of times with its former Soviet states and what it considers to be its sphere of influence, but it always stops short of an all-out, full-out, blown-out conflict. It's always these little skirmishes. So they want to gain influence by, striking fear in those Western institutions.
Well, finally, Julia, the president went to Mississippi Monday to stump for Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. She's faced criticism for a remark about a, quote, public hanging, and the president defended her Monday. Let's listen to that.
Well, I know her, and I know she apologized and she misspoke, but I will tell you this, I've known her for a period of time now as a senator. She's been an excellent senator. She's done a great job. She's somebody that's respected in the Senate.
So Republicans already won the Senate. How critical is this race?
It's critical, I think, in terms of the long-term political game in the South. Even though we've seen a lot of Democratic losses in major races taking place in the Southeast, including Beto O'Rourke in Texas, Stacey Abrams in Georgia, Andrew Gillum in Florida, we're actually seeing a lot of Democrats gain momentum in these states, and they're doing it, and it's becoming increasingly clear each election. Mm-hmm. And I think the president is could be possibly concerned about that. He also doesn't want to lose another race. He campaigns for these candidates, and he wants to keep that seat safe because he's essentially put himself in on it. So it's an important state in that regard.
It's certainly underscored by the fact that he's choosing to visit there at the last possible moment. All right, Julia Manchester, always great to have you. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.